And I've always thought of Bitcoin as a very binary investment, whether it goes from 80 to 8,000 to 6,000 to 3,000 to 13,000, it doesn't matter. This is either zero or it's millions.
When I look at Bitcoin, it is one of the most interesting things happening in that financial services pillar that I've ever seen. And the reason I like it so much are two things. One is, it is for the first time, the cheapest and most frictionless payment rails we've ever seen. And so forget Bitcoin as an underlying currency. You don't have to care about whether it replaces fiat dollars or not.
And I've always thought of Bitcoin as a very binary investment, whether it goes from 80 to 8,000 to 6,000 to 3,000 to 13,000, it doesn't matter. This is either zero or it's millions. Because what it will do is it will create a quasi-gold standard. It'll create an index, except instead of having to own gold, where gold is owned by central banks, it is an instrument that has value that's determined by and between its participants, and it's owned by everybody. So maybe the correct way to say this is that it's not gold, but in gold being gold 2.0, which some people have used about Bitcoin, what it does is it replaces the method of value transfer that you need for fiat money to be valuable. But that only happens if the US dollar looks like it's going to careen into this wall. So I think that's the bet. So the setup is here. So before, there was no path dependence, meaning you were speculating and not really hoping, because if you're using it as schmuck insurance as I was, you were kind of hoping it would never come in. But now, if the probability was 1% that it would be valuable, unfortunately, the probability is now probably like 5 or 10%. And there's a real chance by 2030, we don't find a way to inflate our way out of this. And that the only way to break the back of deflation is essentially to create some quasi form of gold standard. But it'll be almost impossible to do that between governments and central banks. They'll never agree on an instrument and they'll never agree on an exchange. But then bottoms up, people could decide to do it.
When I look at Bitcoin, it is one of the most interesting things happening in that financial services pillar that I've ever seen. And the reason I like it so much are two things. One is, it is for the first time, the cheapest and most frictionless payment rails we've ever seen. And so forget Bitcoin as an underlying currency. You don't have to care about whether it replaces fiat dollars or not. What you have to care about is that instead of paying 2.5% or 1.5%, I can basically pay virtually nothing to clear and basically process transactions and get money from one account to another account, right? From one address to another address, which is effectively what today's payment rails do for people. As a business service, it's genius. And then secondarily, sort of like as an instrument of protecting assets and asset value, I think that will start as a developing world phenomenon, and I think it'll spill over to the developed world. And so you're talking about a 20-year arc, but this thing is going to rip. It's just going to continue to go up and to the right.
I think it's a very good sign when the traditional established infrastructure is short something or skeptical of something, because it should be what is the trail of breadcrumbs that a smart, introspective, intellectually curious investor says, oh, I should pay attention. And when one goes in and actually reads and understands the technical logic around Bitcoin and the actual fundamental product that it's creating and the value that it offers, at the end of the day, here's what you have to believe, which is that in a world of autocracy, currency curbs, quantitative easing, all forms of central bank created or implemented value destruction, you need a fundamentally distributed store of value. Bitcoin is the only one. And so to the extent that you want to put your hands in the hands of, 7 to 11 central bankers across numerous countries to basically drive the logical functioning of capital markets, go ahead. I think Bitcoin needed a moment like this for it to be relevant. In 2013, I bought a lot. And at one point, I think I had almost 5% of all the Bitcoins. My basis is about $80 a coin. I've never bought more. Most of my Bitcoin now sit with a company. And, they use it for trading purposes. They use it to run a bunch of other strategies. And I did that mostly for safety and security and peace of mind. I didn't want to deal with it. I wanted to own equity in a business. That equity can be hedged. That equity can be tax structured advantageously. And then it allows them to run a big business, which generates cash, and I can get a cash and, dividend stream. So I have not bought since I initially basically wrote that article for Bloomberg in 2013. My thoughts are the following. Right now, I think what you're seeing is that it's still a speculative instrument, and it's too speculative for it to be reliable. So if you're going to make the case that, it should replace fiat currency, well, one thing you have to look at is the volatility of the US dollar, and you can't replace it with something that's 9 sigma more volatile. It doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is that it's too, again, going back to what markets are important. The only market that's even more important than the debt markets are the currency markets. I own Bitcoin in my hedge fund. I own Bitcoin in my fund. I own Bitcoin in my private account. It is a huge deal. It's a huge, huge, huge deal. Because what you're talking about right now is for the next 3 to 5 years, an unbelievably better store value. It is gold 2.0. Right? The value of gold that hedges the world economy about $9 trillion, right? $1,300 an ounce, of which only $100 to $150 is the actual production value. So all the rest of it is imputed, where, Lena, you and I have decided that it's worth $1,300 an ounce. Well, guess what? I can do the same thing with Bitcoin, except now I could do it outside the purview of every single government.
39,000. Where's it going?
I mean, can you play the clip in 2012 and 13 when it was at 200 and everybody was laughing at me on CNBC every time I would talk about Bitcoin? Where is it going? It's probably going to 100, then 150, then 200,000. In what period? I don't know. 5 years, 10 years, but it's going there. And the reason is because every time you see all of this stuff happening, it just reminds you that, wow, our leaders are not as trustworthy and reliable as they used to be. And so just in case, we really do need to have some kind of, insurance we can keep under our pillow that gives us some access to an uncorrelated hedge. And it's going to eventually transition to something much more important. But for right now, you're just getting all these data points that prove this thing. It's just the fabric of society is frayed. And until we figure out how to make it better, it's time to just have a little schmuck insurance on the side, and everybody's running in. It's just an incredible thing. I could never have imagined it.